way to get to know our city, and
that's nice
a lot
of you
of fun.
to say, Amy. And also good news for you, Amy. We're extending the tram routes in the next few weeks. It'll do another loop just down Litchfield Street, Poplar Lane, back Tuam Street and High. So we're looking forward to that opening.
Nice to have you on, Barry. We've got to go because something really bad's happening. I think I hear counting crows. What on earth?
I may have flubbed my answer. It doesn't change the fact that Metallica sucks.
What a terrible song. Liam here, Amy Carter, kia ora, thank you. I'm back tomorrow. Lisa Owens, Checkpoint next.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei, the former Shorty Street actor and musician turned landlord who was trolling his own tenant over their vaccine pass policy. He reckons it's not very punk rock to screen customers. We'll let you decide what's cool and what's not. The Qantas credit policy that's going down like a lead balloon. What does it mean for Kiwi customers with flight dollars in the bank? The relentless battle against COVID means Anzac Day services will look different again this year. The East Coast can't seem to get a break. It's standing by for another weather walloping. And buns that get some of you hot and cross, chalky cross buns. Anyone want custard with that?
RNZ News at 5. Good afternoon. Ahi ahi Mārie. I'm Evie Ashton. Clouds are starting to form over Gisborne as Tairāwhiti and Wairoa prepare to be hammered by a second deluge in 3 weeks. Up to 350 millimetres is expected to hit, more than 3 times the average rainfall for the entire month of April. Our Hawke's Bay reporter for Tairāwhiti, Tom Kitchen, has more.
Met Service upgraded its rain warning to the most extreme, a red. This rain may cause dangerous river conditions and significant flooding. Slips and floodwaters are likely to disrupt travel, make some roads impassable, and could possibly isolate communities. Along with this rain, strong winds are also forecast. They could damage trees, power lines and unsecured structures. The worst of the weather is expected to be tonight until Thursday morning.
A Tairāwhiti farmer is warning there's only so much that can be done to prepare for a storm like the one that's forecast. Sam Hain farms sheep and beef about 50 kilometres west of Gisborne. He's got his chainsaw ready to cut up trees and the fork is on his tractor ready to clear the roads. But he says being out there during a storm can actually cause more problems.
What I mean by that is by driving around, all you do is all the stock run to the gates to come in, hoping they're going to get shifted and you just create mud. So it's actually a bit of a stand back and wait sort of attitude whereby you wait for the rain to pass and damage to be done, and then we just go out and clear culverts and assess the damage.
Sam Hain says it's important that farmers talk to each other for support as the storm passes through. The rest of the North Island won't escape the bad weather, with warnings also issued for other parts of the country. Met Service says heavy rain could hit parts of the Hawke's Bay, Great Barrier Island and Northland from tonight, and is warning of strong winds along the entire east coast. Strong wind warnings are also in place across the rest of the North Island tomorrow. Down south, a heavy rain watch is in place for Westland today. A former National MP who proposed a coward punch bill says a jail sentence today for a fatal attack is too light. Daniel Havili was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months in prison for the manslaughter of Liafau Vake, a rising MMA fighter. Havili punched Vake, who fell and hit his head, causing swelling from which he died later in hospital. Former National MP Matt King introduced a bill that would have created a specific offence for coward punches.
It would just bring more focus on the fact that these sorts of coward punches can kill people, and 2 years and 9 months is nothing for punching someone and killing someone. It's not acceptable.
The bill was voted down by Labour, New Zealand First and the Greens in 2020. The Prime Minister says her thoughts are with the family of a teenager who died after receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. The Director-General of Health says the Independent Safety Monitoring Board found the death is most likely vaccine-related, but there's still some doubt. Jacinda Ardern expressed her sympathy.
As you know, with anyone who experiences negative impacts from medicines, my thoughts are with the family, and that should be first and foremost. But of course, I would hope that what people see is also the transparency around reporting that we've had since the very beginning.
Dr. Ashley Bloomfield says the teen's family doesn't want the death to discourage others from getting vaccinated. And the co-owner of an Auckland bar that continues to use vaccine passes says he thought it was a prank when the bar received a negative Facebook review from its landlord. Paul Reid of Icon Group rated Whammy Bar 1 star, saying it used to be cool. Today he stood by his words and his use of the social media platform to air his views. He says vaccine passes and the resulting exclusion of some customers seems like a bad business decision. Co-owner of Whammy Bar, Tom Anderson, says he was surprised at the review and disagrees with Paul Reid's comments.
Nobody knows our business better than us, and we know what our staff want, and we know what our punters and community want, and that's to feel as safe as possible while case numbers are still high. This is a temporary solution.
Whammy Bar has since had dozens of positive reviews on Facebook. To sport, and the Hurricanes coach Jason Holland has backed captain Adi Savia's criticism of the refereeing in last weekend's loss to the Crusaders. Savia thought the Hurricanes should have been awarded a late penalty when pushing to score, while Holland felt there were some incidents the Crusaders got away with. Holland wants more consistency from the officials tonight against Moana Pacifica in Wellington.
We have a bit of an issue around some player safety stuff and around some high shots. So we just want that to be really consistent. It's, there's yellows and reds going on all over the place at the moment, and there wasn't one on the weekend, which was pretty obvious.
The football Ferns have lost experienced defender Ria Percival to a long-term knee injury, but will welcome back Rebecca Stott for tonight's second and final game against Australia in Canberra. Percival was hurt early in Friday's 2-1 loss to the Matildas and has returned to her club, Tottenham Hotspur, for further assessment. Stott has come back to football after recovering from cancer. Former Black Cap Hamish Bennett has announced his retirement from first-class cricket after a 17-year career. And the Australian state of Victoria will host the 2026 Commonwealth Games across 4 regional hubs in a break from the traditional single-city model. This year's Games are in Birmingham in late July. That's the news.
A plea for help as crime rises in central Auckland.
Those offenders, they have no fear of police, they have no fear of law, they have no fear of being caught.
Frustration after a scathing report on Blackfern's culture.
I wish I could be this bad at my job and get to keep it.
While Tairāwhiti braces for more wild weather.
Please prepare, make sure you've got all your devices charged, you've got food to survive over 2-3 days.
You're calm in the storm. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And if you'd like to listen live or listen again, download the app to your phone. That's the RNZ app. You're on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. With former Cyclone Philly approaching the North Island, keep up to date with the latest warnings and watches. From Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Rain over Northland is spreading south to the Bay of Plenty today and elsewhere tomorrow. Some heavy falls. Easing from Northland to Waikato tomorrow. Gale southeasterlies are developing, changing to southwest tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Rain is developing in Gisborne this evening and Hawke's Bay overnight, becoming heavy with downpours and possible thunderstorms, gale force southeasterlies. For Waitomo, Taumarunui, Taihape and also Wairarapa, cloudy periods, occasional rain tomorrow. From Taranaki to Wellington, scattered showers that are clearing tomorrow. Looking to the South Island, for Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, a few showers today, mainly fine tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, mainly fine, a few showers this evening. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, rain in Canterbury easing this afternoon, cloudy periods elsewhere. And for the Chatham Islands, Rekohu, occasional rain developing this evening. It's 7 minutes past 5. We'll update you with the news headlines at 5:30.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Tonight, the former actor and musician who is hitting a seriously sour note in a real-life COVID drama. Paul Reid, a former Shorty Street star turned landlord, has been trashing some of his own tenants for their vaccine pass policies. Whammy Bar on K Road still uses the passes even though they're no longer legally required. Now, Reed, their landlord, is accused of acting badly on social media, giving the bar a 1-star rating and a negative review. In one of his posts, he refers to the venue's history as a punk rock anti-establishment dive bar, inferring nothing is as uncool as asking to scan a pass. But it's the landlord that's getting an ice-cold response. Katie Todd has the story.
Since announcing the continued use of vaccine passes 2 weeks ago, Whammy Bar's been whammed with dozens of negative reviews and angry social media comments from across the country. Co-owner Tom Anderson says it had just started to peter out when one more comment caught him by surprise.
Last night I got a notification that our landlord had posted a 1-star negative review on our page, which I first thought was probably a fake account, and then I went through and found out that no, it was actually his real account, and sort of shared it with a few of the staff going, this is kind of mind-bending.
That landlord, Paul Reed of Icon Group, says he's got no regrets.
I think the more punk rock way to operate Whammy Bar would be to be more of an inclusive environment that doesn't kind of discriminate against people's health decisions.
Reed defended his use of social media to criticise his tenants rather than contacting them directly.
Look, I'm also a member of the public and I'm allowed to have my opinion, so I just wanted to share my views and utilise my freedom of speech.
Asked how often he visits Whammy Bar as a customer, he says he sometimes goes to check pipes and fix things.
I just thought it was a poor business decision to decide to voluntarily exclude a certain percentage of the population who may be unvaccinated for, a host of ethical, religious or health reasons.
You've given them a 1-star review, which would arguably contribute to them not having a successful business. Are you sure that's the right way to go about it?
Look, at the end of the day, I think it's a fantastic way of going about it because it's going to draw a lot of attention to them, and there's going to be a lot of people that completely disagree with me, and they can do nothing better than instead of slandering me online, they can go show their support for Whammy Bar.
And that has happened. Since Reed's comment, the bar has since had dozens of positive reviews on Facebook from supporters. It's even got the attention of Auckland Central MP Chloe Swarbrick. She says she's not sure how much landlord and punk rock align.
I do think that it was really deeply unfortunate that a commercial landlord has decided to weigh in and effectively neg their own commercial tenant.
In Reed's comments on Whammy Bar's Facebook, he said he'd given Whammy Bar $60,000 throughout COVID-19 to help it cover rent. Whammy Bar's Tom Anderson thinks that's a bit misleading.
We have a good relationship with our property managers, and we've negotiated rent breaks throughout the pandemic that unfortunately he chose to break the confidentiality of and air publicly, which was an unfortunate way, especially considering he framed it as if he had personally donated us a large amount of money rather than had to legally oblige to a clause in our lease agreement.
Whammy Bar is sticking by their decision to keep vaccine passes. Tom Anderson says with high numbers of COVID cases being recorded each day, he knows what the bar's staff and customers want, and that's to feel safe.
Have cheaper public transport prices got you out of your car and onto the bus or the train? The subsidies are part of a 3-month package to ease the pressure on people's wallets. But should they be extended further or even become a permanent fixture? The first week of cut price fares were in place. Public transport use in Auckland reached record highs, hitting 1 million trips. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
In a bid to ease the pain at the pump, the government introduced a package discounting fuel and halving the price of public transport. It's been set for 3 months, a temporary fix in response to the Ukraine conflict and other supply chain disruptions, with the public transport subsidies running until the end of June. Nationals leader Chris Luxon was asked whether that should become more permanent.
We should keep revisiting it. But ultimately, the public transport needs to stand on its own feet. It can't be subsidised or underwritten, right? It has to be able to build on its own case.
These Aucklanders RNZ spoke to on Queen Street welcome the cheaper fares, including James, who says he's now using public transport more regularly.
Yes, I have.
You have?
Yes.
Purely because of the prices?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
So I assume you'd want the half price to stick around for a while?
I want it much lesser due to this COVID-19 impact that's been around for people and also I would like lesser
So even cheaper than it is now?
I think that would be much more better.
Maybe even free?
Yeah, I think that would be much good. If it's in the city area, I think it should be free.
Yeah, definitely. That's a big cut in my budget. That's good.
Yes, I think that is big difference, and I commute to a city every day from Milford, and for me, yes, it is good deal, very good deal.
You'd save a lot of money doing it that often.
Of course, yes.
Cool.
Greens co-leader James Shaw would like the government to go even further.
We think that public transport should be free. There are places in the world that have done that, and it's had a tremendous effect.
Finance Minister Grant Robertson won't give much away ahead of the May 19th budget.
I'm not going to prejudge future budget commitments.
He would say public transport will play an important part in achieving New Zealand's climate goals.
It also plays an important role in supporting particularly those on low and middle income, so obviously we'll continue to look at the ways that we can support it.
The cost of the 3-month reductions estimated to be between $25 and $40 million.
Homai o whakaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. Tell us whether the cut price transport fares have got you hopping on the bus or the train. And what do you think about places still checking vaccine passes? You can text me, pātui mai 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Extreme weather is forecast to hit Tairawhiti in Wairoa from tonight, just 3 weeks after the last severe downpour tore bridges apart and destroyed roads. Residents are bracing for a trifecta of heavy rain, strong winds and huge swells. Our reporter Jimmy Ellingham joins us from Gisborne now. Kia ora, Jimmy. How's it looking at the moment?
Yeah, kia ora, Lisa. We'll talk about the calm before the storm. We've got some heavy rain and very strong wind forecast, as you said, but right now and this afternoon it's been lovely. It's been the temperature was in the early to mid-20s. It's calm. There's hardly a breath of wind. There is cloud banking up in the sky, though. There's that sense that something's about to happen. But I'm standing on the beachfront at the moment, and there's people down here fishing, people going for runs, people walking their dogs. It's very hard to imagine what's in store for this town tomorrow.
Yeah, and you drove from Palmerston North. Was it all calm? How were the roads looking?
There were still quite a few signs on the roads from the storm here 3 weeks ago. It was quite a slow drive between Napier and Gisborne. Lots of stop-go signs, road workers out, signs of slips, even areas where the road had washed away. There's been lots of repair work done, though, but it was a lot slower than normal. And, of course, tomorrow travellers are warned to stay off the roads if possible. There's a chance that some of these roads around Gisborne and Tairawhiti could be shut and communities isolated.
And what about further south in Wairoa? What are they expecting?
Wairoa's got some very heavy rain forecast. For Gisborne, it's something in the order of 200 to 300 mils in the 24-hour period from tonight. But Wairoa is even more than that, 250 to 350. So Met Service has issued a red alert. There's an orange alert for both regions for the strong winds. Gusts of up to 120 kilometres an hour are expected. So it's going to be a rough ride in Tairawhiti and Wairoa.
Hey, Jimmy, what beach are you on?
Waikanae Beach. It's where there's been a bit of forestry splash washed up here from the storms, I think, a few weeks ago, but otherwise it's really nice.
Okay, if you get a few minutes, go to Captain Morgan's and get an ice cream for us all. Hey, appreciate you joining us. That is Jimmy Ellingham live from Gisborne there. As he says, calm before the storm. They're expecting heavy rain there and residents are being warned to be prepared. Friends of a rising MMA fighter and father killed in a one-punch attack want much tougher minimum sentences akin to ones Australia has. Today, Daniel Havili was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months in prison for the manslaughter of Leofar Vake, a rising MMA fighter. Havili punched Vake in an unprovoked attack. Vake died 9 days later in hospital. His friends think less than 3 years behind bars is heartbreaking and not a deterrent to killing someone. Jordan Bond reports.
In May last year, after a night out drinking and an argument outside a bar, Daniel Havili punched Leofar Vake in the side of the head. Vake's hands were down at his side. He fell and his head hit the pavement hard. His brain bled and his skull was fractured, causing swelling which ultimately killed him. Today, Daniel Havili was jailed for this.
Mr Havili, I sentence you on the charge of manslaughter to 2 years, 9 months imprisonment. Please stand down. Thank you, counsel. Any matters arising? Thank you.
No, thank you.
Ms Freya?
Friends of Vake's yelled out their displeasure at the length of the sentence after Justice Sally Fitzgerald's statements. 2 years and 9 months in prison for taking someone's life was not enough for Vake's good friend and fellow MMA fighter Dan Hooker.
That's heartbreaking. 2-year sentence for killing someone is not a deterrent whatsoever. There has to be some kind of change because that is completely... I don't know anyone that can accept that.
Justice Fitzgerald found similar manslaughter cases had a starting point of around 5 years in prison. She applied discounts for Havili's guilty plea, his troubled childhood, which she said had a causative link to his violence, as well as his remorse and rehabilitation efforts. Those discounts brought the final jail sentence from 5 years to just under 3. Dan Hooker says Australia dealt with the same issue of coward punches much more harshly.
There's deterrence over there. There's an 8-year minimum for killing someone with a coward punch. That's an 8-year minimum in Australia. That's something that the team is calling for quite strongly, is to replicate what's been done in Australia.
In New South Wales, this is the case. 8 years minimum in jail for anyone found guilty of fatally striking a person while under the influence of alcohol or drugs. The first conviction under that law came in 2017 and the offender got 10 years in prison. Liu Vake is survived by his wife and 4-year-old daughter. His sister wrote a statement for the hearing saying he was a devoted father and they struggle to answer questions when his daughter asks where her dad is.
It is 20 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The credit policy of Aussie airline Qantas is going down like a lead balloon with a consumer advocacy group that says it's unfair and unworkable. It could also see Kiwis stuck with millions in flight dollars they may struggle to spend unless they choose a flight that costs the same or more than their original fare. And it's no small problem with Qantas holding more than $1.5 billion in credits. Australian consumer advocacy group Choice has lodged a complaint with its competition watchdog. Choice spokesperson Dean Price joins us now. Hi, Dean.
Hi there.
Tell us, what are the main problems people are experiencing trying to cash in their credits or buy tickets?
Look, unfortunately, there's a whole range of problems that people are facing. So, as you mentioned, one of the terms and conditions that we've found particularly unfair is the one that forces people to only use their voucher for a flight that is of equal or greater value than the one that they bought to begin with. And, you know, while sometimes that might be okay, if you've booked an international flight, it can be quite hard to find a domestic flight of similar value that you can actually use that voucher for. But we've also had some other problems with people not being able to transfer their credit vouchers. So one person who complained to us had booked a flight for their daughter to go to Singapore, but now that was cancelled because of COVID, and now trying to book another flight for their daughter is quite difficult, rather than being able to spend that, say, on a family holiday domestically.
Is it Jetstar as well as Qantas?
Look, Jetstar definitely. We've actually received complaints about most airlines, Virgin Australia as well, but most of the complaints that we've received have been about Qantas, and the investigations that we've done since into the terms and conditions have found that the Qantas terms and conditions are some of the worst that we've come across.
And I understand that if there is a cheaper ticket that you would like to purchase, you can't even buy the ticket and waive whatever your balance is. Is that right?
Look, it depends on when you bought the ticket, and this is part of the confusing thing. The terms and conditions changed depending on when you actually booked the ticket and when it was cancelled. So we've actually had some people whose only option has been to use that voucher and just forfeit that money, which we also think is not very fair. So some people have been able to do that, but in some circumstances, yeah, you're right, you can't even do that.
Any idea how many Kiwis are caught up in this and how much money?
Unfortunately not. What we do know is that from what Qantas has said to us is that apparently only 7% of their customers have actually cashed in their vouchers and around, I think, 12% of Jetstar customers. I'm not sure where those people are based, how many are in Australia, how many are in New Zealand, and how many are probably in other parts of the world as well.
How would you sum up the way you think Qantas is treating their customers?
Look, at a time when people are finally getting more comfortable travelling and borders are reopening, we really think it's a time when Qantas should really be encouraging and making it as easy as possible for people to travel, whereas what they seem to be doing is the opposite, with long wait times with their customer service queues and, unfortunately also long wait times in airports in both Sydney and Melbourne over the past few days. It just seems to go against the grain of what we'd expect. We'd hope that they'll be encouraging people to travel when they feel comfortable to do so, rather than making it hard and difficult.
Because what Qantas says is they made a heap of concessions during COVID, right? And it's only customers who booked their fares after the beginning of September 2021 that there were T's and C's applied and they were there in writing, right? So that is their position. That's fair, isn't it?
Look, I don't know about you, but I know that when I've tried to read terms and conditions of many airlines, including Qantas's ticketing, it can be impenetrable, and that's what we've heard people say. And one of the things that we are calling on the Australian government to do is actually set some standards so that those rights are known upfront and for everybody before they book. So it doesn't change depending on, what date you booked the ticket on or what airline you're booking. That there just should be some minimum standards for everybody so that they know what happens if they are going to cancel their flight.
Dean, has Choice had an opportunity to speak to Qantas directly?
We've definitely sought their input, yes. We asked them for some comment. We asked them for clarity, the $1.4 billion that you mentioned before. We did try to find out how many of those are flight vouchers, and they wouldn't give us the answer. We know that some of those are flight vouchers. We know that some of those are just bookings made in advance. But we also know that even early this year, that amount went up by $200 million purely in flight vouchers. So it's definitely an issue. It's definitely an issue that's happened both before and after the change in terms and conditions on the 30th of September. But we want something to happen to make sure that it is an ongoing problem into the future.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is Dean Price from the Aussie consumer advocacy group Choice. Let us know if you're caught up on this. If you've got Qantas credits that you're finding it really hard to spend, text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The DG of Health, Dr Ashley Bloomfield, says the death of a teenager after having the COVID vaccine is very sad and quite sudden. He says the COVID Independent Safety Monitoring Board found the death is likely vaccine-related, but there is still some doubt. Dr Bloomfield also passed on a message from the teenager's family.
But one thing I do want to say is the family were very clear that they didn't want this death, this unfortunate and very sad death, to in any way put people off from being vaccinated or to be used by groups to try and undermine vaccination efforts in New Zealand.
Dr Bloomfield didn't know the exact time frame but said the teenager died over a week after being vaccinated.
Actually, the death was quite sudden and the person hadn't had any symptoms before the death.
Not even of
the person hadn't had any symptoms.
There were 11,063 new community cases of COVID-19 today. 622 people are in hospital, with 23 in ICU. Ashley Bloomfield said case numbers are dropping and new hospital admissions are also trending down.
The northern region now has the lowest case rate after reaching that quite high early peak, and in all the other regions it's slowly declining. Overall, in just about every DHB, rates are coming down, certainly for all DHBs in the central region, of which Wellington is a part. In the southern region, all DHBs except the west coast, the case rates rose through March and peaked in late March and have started to decline.
16 people are reported to have died with COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of deaths to 516. The Ministry of Health is also urging people to get their flu jabs ahead of winter. It is almost 27 minutes past 5. Let's get to some of your feedback. A lot of you getting in touch about our earlier item. This is on the Whammy Bar, and Paul Reid is the landlord of this particular bar, and he's been posting one-star reviews of the bar and criticising them over their vaccine pass policy. Punk definitely isn't being a foolish, rude and wealthy landlord. Good grief, this listener says. Someone else says, Lisa, I wouldn't have thought criticising your tenant's business decision was a dumb business decision itself. If businesses decide for the safety of staff and customers to keep some measures in place, that is their right and they are exercising their freedom to do so. Wasn't that what the occupiers wanted? Freedom to be allowed to do what you want. Jan's got in touch to say, good on Whammy Bar, fully support their decision. Patrick says, kia ora Lisa, re-vax passport, yes, totally agree with maintaining the checks. It certainly applies in my social choices. And another person says, I would rather public places still scan the vax passes. They are still required in most places in Australia and should be here too. And another person says, I support use of passes, especially when numbers of cases are still high. I go to Whammy Bar as they care about their staff and customers. Linda's got in touch to say, I believe any business that demands vaccine passes when the government has removed the mandate is blatant discrimination. Do keep your feedback coming. You can text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Culinary crime or coup? Millions of hot cross buns are sold in the countdown to Easter, and while the classic bun is still the outright winner, there are some new kids on the block. Now brace for it, because it has the potential to make the traditionalists amongst us both hot and cross. One of the flavour combos is mango, raspberry and white chocolate. What do you think of that then? Well, joining us now is Ryan McMullen, Countdown's head baker. Hi Ryan.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. No judgment with this next question. Whose idea was it to start sticking other things in hot cross buns?
Well, I think it's been something that's been developing over the years, and we've sort of just kept giving customers some different options. As we had this year with a couple of different fruit inclusions. The one I put out, the mango and raspberry, they're two different products, a mango and a raspberry product, not combined.
And the chocolate, is that in with with the mango or the raspberry?
Yeah, well, we've had a chocolate-based product for a handful of years now, but we've got a orange and chocolate flavour, dark chocolate. We've got a raspberry and white chocolate flavour and a mango brioche flavour.
Do you realise how controversial this is, Ryan?
Oh, I know it's a bit confronting for some people. I mean, I think as you talked about, the vast majority of customers, sort of around about 70% still buy traditional hot cross buns that we make in our stores fresh every day. But something a bit different and a bit new is always exciting.
Is there even debate in your own bakery about whether, you should be messing with something that ain't broke?
Oh, it's a really good question. So we actually had a discussion today on that and surveyed just really quickly amongst a team of about 60 people, and it was pretty diverse feedback from the, no, we should be more traditional to no, keep pushing innovation and flavours. I think we've got to keep working on providing really good traditional products for the vast majority of our customers, but it's always a bit of fun to have some different flavours in there as we keep adding in each year.
Right, Ryan, how far are you prepared to push the boat out? What about cheese and Marmite?
I saw that in Australia. I'm not quite sure we'd go that far, that seems a little bit extreme.
Peanut butter and jam?
Well, peanut butter's sort of in topic at the moment. I don't know. We've certainly started looking at some different collabs for next year, in line with our really successful Cookie Time one this year with the Cookie Crush. But
yeah, what is that? I mean, what is a Cookie Crush hot cross bun? What is that?
Oh, so that's a collab with Cookie Time Cookies in New Zealand, a really well-known brand, and we worked with them to come up with a hot cross bun that's got their cookies, their iconic cookie crushed up inside the bun, and a small cookie placed on top of the bun with a chocolate cross. So something a bit different, quite indulgent.
Hang on a minute, Ryan. I just want to make sure I've got this right. So you actually crumble the cookie into the bun?
Yeah, there's bits of crushed up cookie inside the mix as well as the whole one on top.
So crunchy bits as well as soft bits?
Yeah, it's quite a different indulgent treat. Not something you perhaps eat lots of every day, but as a treat, absolutely.
Has this all just become a bit much?
Well, like I say, I think, there's certainly the vast portion of the product we sell in hot cross buns is still traditional. Every year we like to give customers some different things, and we sort of try things, and some of the flavours we've got this year perhaps won't be back next year, but we might look to put one or two other things in just to keep it a bit interesting. But we'll keep focusing on doing our traditional, like I said, around about 70% of what we sell. It's really important.
So, Ryan, in raw numbers, I mean, how many of the traditional ones go?
Well, look, I think so this week we'll sell more than 500,000 packets of hot cross buns through our Countdown stores. Over the course of the Easter event, it'll be, close to 2 million packets. So
with 6 in a packet? 6 in a packet?
Yeah, 6 in a pack, yeah. It's a lot of hot cross buns. So maybe 1.5 mil or thereabouts would be traditional, I suppose, across the range.
And what will you be having?
Well, I really like the mango brioche, but I've got to say traditional hot cross bun's pretty good, right?
And is there a right ratio of butter to bun, just to cap it off?
Well, that depends who you ask. If you're asking me, you've got to have lots, right? It's got to be literally falling off the side. But, yeah.
You're one of those people who have a bit of bun with their butter, are you, Ryan?
Yeah, I don't mind. I feel a bit guilty about it for a little while, but, you've got to enjoy yourself sometimes.
Hey, really appreciate your time, Ryan. That's Ryan McMullen, who's Countdown's head baker. Keen for your thoughts on that. How far's too far with the hot cross bun? Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Kia ora, e te iwi e haere ake nei e Checkpoint. COVID means Anzac Day commemorations won't be back to full force just yet. The Queen talks about having the virus, and the skinny skyscraper giving people motion sickness and me the heebie-jeebies. You'll want to check this one out. Homai o whakaaro. We'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program. Don't forget you can get in touch via text 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to get to the headlines now. Anei a iwi mina pitipita kōrero.
Tai Rāwhiti and Wairoa are preparing to be hammered by a second deluge in 3 weeks. Up to 350 millimetres of rain is expected to hit as former Cyclone Fili moves through. Bay of Plenty and Waikato motorists are urged not to travel from late today to early Thursday. Warnings have also been issued for other parts of the North Island. Met Service says heavy rain could hit Hawke's Bay, Great Barrier Island and Northland from tonight. A friend of a rising MMA fighter who was killed by an undefended punch to the head wants a longer prison sentence for his attacker. Daniel Havili was jailed for 2 years and 9 months after pleading guilty to the manslaughter of Leofau. Judge Sally Fitzgerald discounted the sentence because of Havili's guilty plea, his troubled childhood and his remorse. The Prime Minister says her thoughts are with the family of a teenager who died after receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. The Director General of Health says the death is most likely vaccine-related, but there's still some doubt. In today's COVID figures, 622 people are in hospital and 16 more people have died with the virus. There are 11,063 new community cases. Authorities in the eastern Ukrainian region of Luhansk say Russian tanks are advancing for a renewed assault. Western officials expect Russia to double or even triple its forces in the Donbass, where it already has 40,000 troops. Jacinda Ardern says New Zealand isn't Switzerland and has always taken a stand on foreign policy issues. The government has committed $7.5 million to fund weapons and ammunition for Ukraine. And the co-owner of an Auckland bar that continues to use vaccine passes says he thought it was a prank when the bar received a negative Facebook review from its landlord, Paul Reid. Tom Anderson says vaccine passes will stay at Whammy Bar because staff and punters want to feel safe while COVID case numbers are high. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 6 and RNZ is gratefully receiving any recipes for hot cross buns made out of sourdough starter.
And Evie, favourite flavour?
Oh, I'm traditional. There's actually a Norwegian bun that I try to make every year, but I'm going to try it with my sourdough this year.
Oh, you overachiever. Yeah, we're keen for feedback on that one. Let us know your thoughts. 2101. Are you with Evie or have you got your own favourite flavour? So no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. It's time to get to the business news. Ko taku hoa anai ko Nona Peltier, who is here to talk all things business. Let's talk about business confidence. Nona remains deeply pessimistic.
Well, I'm a bit disappointed. I actually want to talk about the hot crust buns.
Oh, do you? Okay, go first,
okay.
Nona.
I want the cookie one with the special cookie on top. Yeah, that's what I want to try.
With crunchy bits. Do you reckon that works?
I don't care.
Okay. All right. We'll do a taste test maybe, Nona. Now, business confidence. Deeply pessimistic.
It sure is. Yeah. Now, this is the quarterly survey of business opinion from the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research. And what they're basically saying is that there's been a fall off in all sorts of confidence around, Omicron is one thing, surging inflation is another, and interest rates, price rises, consumers staying away. The survey showed that 94% of the respondents are facing increased costs, and all of them basically we're looking to, we're expecting these prices to continue to rise into the next quarter. But on the other side, they were saying, well, they're now finally able to raise their prices because that's what consumers are expecting. However, because of these higher costs, it's eating into company profits. It's a terrible mix of a situation for businesses to be in. So others have looked at it and come up with basically profit slumping, growth may follow suit. This suggests that the Reserve Bank is going to have to continue to tighten interest rates. However, that increases the risk of a recession. So tomorrow, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand is going to meet with their Monetary Policy Committee. They're going to have a lot to talk about. And one of the things that people are thinking is that there's going to be a cash rate rise of between 25 points or 50 points. So we'll have to see what happens there.
And Nona, the Electricity Authority, it's adopting a new pricing plan for power distribution. I mean, what does that mean for everyday people paying their bills?
Well, some people might remember hearing about this before because the conversation has been going on for more than 10 years. So lots of people have had their say about this, and what they finally came up with is a new pricing methodology which doesn't result in Transpower getting more money to manage the national grid. So that's costing $800 million, basically. But it's going to mean that some people in some parts of the country are going to pay more and others are going to pay less, depending on where you are. So some of the big savings is going to be, for example, on the east coast of the North Island. Though the West Coasters and the South Island, they're going to have the biggest increases. And it's going to be a mix. But basically what they've come up with is what they think is going to be a fair, smoother, better pricing policy than anything that they'd come up with before. So 10 years in the making. Let's hope they got it right this time. And in any case, you can expect some differences in your prices from next April.
And Nona, shall we take a spin around the markets, please?
Let's do that. The local top 50 index, it closed down 1/3%, which is pretty good considering the markets overall are a bit nervous. And that was a 43-point drop to 11,889. The New Zealand dollar took a bit of a hit as the US dollar is holding just below two-year highs at 68.3 US cents, 92 Australian and 52.4 British pence.
You'll be pleased to know, Nona, that while we've been talking, a piece of feedback has come in. It says, oh my God, that cookie time hot cross bun sounds amazing.
There you go.
So there is someone who agrees with you. Thanks for that, Nona. Ka kite. Nona Baltier with Business News and some commentary on hot cross buns to boot. The ongoing battle against COVID means Anzac Day commemorations will be a little different again this year. The dawn service at Auckland War Memorial Museum, which is usually one of the biggest, is still happening, but it's invite only. And in Christchurch's Cramner Square, there'll be no crowds and no parades. A number of other events are cancelled or have been downsized. And joining us now is RSA National President BJ Clark. Hi, BJ.
Kia ora, how are you this evening?
I'm really well. Shall we start with the Auckland Museum service? I mean, how is that operating and how big is it going to be this year?
Okay, so the Auckland service, and I've just been speaking to the District President of Auckland this afternoon, the way they're running it this year is the veterans will not be marching. However, they will be in an area which will be away from the general public to ensure their protection. But there's no restriction on the public attending. In fact, we encourage the public to attend and show their respect and remember those that have served New Zealand in the past.
So when there is information on the council websites that says it's invite only, the public are still definitely allowed to go, BJ?
They certainly are. The invite only is, I would imagine they're directing that towards to this special guests that would normally be there on Anzac Day. They have certainly been reduced, but the public are encouraged to attend. And as I say, the veterans will be in an area away in front of the public in what I think the Auckland District President called the inner sanctum, but just to protect them from any possibility of infection from COVID.
Yeah, so you're wanting, BJ, to restrict sort of mingling in large crowds for some of the veterans who may be older and vulnerable.
Sure, we're minimising that. And again, in Wellington, the same sort of situation is happening. They are not marching this year. However, the veterans will be seated on the forecourt in front of Pukeahu, and the crowd will be still in the same area as they are each year at the back of the area in front of the memorial.
Why no marching, BJ? Why is that a particular issue?
I think it just causes a bit of an issue of travelling over distance. And it's not easily to control so much. So what we're trying to do is put protections around the parades and make it as easy as possible for us to ensure their safety. But can I just say also, I'm encouraging RSAs around the country to have some form of service. And they're all, most of them are planning that, and they're planning it with a degree of safety that we haven't had to have in the past, just to ensure that both it's not only veterans, but also to ensure the public also are protected through this COVID issue.
Yeah, if we go to orange before Anzac Day, do you reckon that'll change much, BJ?
I think it's getting pretty close, and so there are a lot of there's a lot of planning that has to happen for Anzac parades. So I think what we're doing is we're being pretty nimble and flexible. So we will work with whatever we're given. But as I say, at this stage, we're encouraging the public to come out. The RSAs have got plans in place to ensure safety for everyone, the veterans and the public. But this is a day when the public do show and acknowledge their support and the remembrance for those that have served the country. So we're really looking forward to people coming out and showing that support.
For a lot of older people in particular, COVID has been pretty isolating, hasn't it? And I'm just wondering, how important is it for your veterans to be able to actually get together for this?
You're correct. And it is important for veterans to get together on Anzac Day. It's an opportunity, many of them won't have seen each other, probably over the last year or since the last Anzac Day. And it's a time when they get together and remember, the service that they had together, and just to check up on their mates to make sure that they're okay. A veteran is the first person that will notice a change in another veteran. And so Anzac Day, I suppose you could say, is just an opportunity for them to see that their friends, their mates are okay. And, just to get together, a bit of camaraderie, forget perhaps, or, just push to the side all of the ills over the last year, and just to enjoy a drink, whether it be alcoholic or non-alcoholic, it doesn't matter. But just to enjoy a drink and a bit of camaraderie and probably talk some very tall stories about their service.
Pretty important time to be reflecting also, I imagine, with what is going on in Ukraine and with New Zealand deploying to Europe as well.
We are also always those that are serving overseas, and that's one thing that we often forget on Anzac Day, is the country always has our young veterans serving somewhere in the world, and we always will remember them. We'll be thinking of all of our veterans serving overseas on Anzac Day, and trusting that due to their excellent training and looking after each other, that they'll be safe and that they'll come home to their families at the end of their tour.
Nice to talk to you, BJ. Thanks for joining us. That is RSA National President BJ Clark. To Ukraine now, and as Russia bolsters its forces in the east, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country is preparing to do battle with tens of thousands of Russian troops. Meanwhile, the EU is promising to deliver more weapons to Ukraine, but some say it's too little too late. The ABC's Isabella Higgins has more.
Tatiana Nolchenko walks through the ruins of her childhood home. Not much is left of the kitchen, but somehow jars of homemade jam survived a relentless siege.
We used to cook here for birthdays. We gathered together and cooked here. The memories are heartbreaking. I want to cry all the time.
She struggles to comprehend what happened to her town of Makariv, which was occupied by Russian soldiers for days on end. About 10,000 people lived here before the war. Already, authorities say 130 bodies have been found, and it's estimated about half of all buildings here were either destroyed or damaged.
There are no military objects here if they came on purpose to destroy them. This is a town. There are houses, a hospital, a supermarket, and offices. People's lives were ruined within one day.
Tetiana fled in the early days of the war. When I ask her what happened to those who stayed, she shakes her head and cries. Vitaly Shrebak is a family friend who comforts her as she sobs. He says this war has destroyed his whole life.
My wife was killed. She was a family doctor. She was only 25 years old. She didn't leave the country, although it was really scary during the first couple of days.
The 23-year-old says she was volunteering at a field hospital, which was hit by an attack.
My entire existence doesn't make sense anymore. I don't know what to do now. I used to do a lot of things previously, and she was always there for me. I'm not human without her.
For those returning to their ruined homes, it seems impossible to start recovery while the war still wages. But 6 weeks into this conflict, and a peace deal still seems far from reach. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Moscow is not willing to halt its attack during upcoming peace talks, while Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has made it clear his country is not ready to give up territory to Russia. Here he is speaking to CBS's 60 Minutes program through a translator.
We were not ready to give up our territory from the beginning. Had we been willing to give up our territory, there would have been no war.
OK, let's get to some of your feedback now. And boy, is it flooding in on the really important issues. This one, hot cross buns. Ooh, push button A, we have. This person says there's a bakery in Petone that's doing halloumi cross buns. Seriously? Someone else says, make whatever buns you like, but to be a hot cross bun, thou shalt be cinnamon and sultana. Katrina reckons that Marmite and butter, oh no, you've lost me, on hot cross buns is delicious. Perfect mix of sweet and savoury. Yeah, I'm learning something new. This person says the only way to eat hot cross buns is with ice cream rather than butter. I reckon I could give that a crack. Rod from Wellington says, Lisa, mango and brioche. Jesus wept. Scotty says, hello, butter is betterer. Love countdowns well-proofed in yeasty buns. And another person reckons hot cross buns made from kumara are perfect. And they say the best when I get the brew just right. Another individual says, accidentally bought a packet of those mango brioche hot cross buns. Truly awful. Followed by multiple exclamation marks, possibly because I thought they were normal hot cross buns because they were poorly labelled, and they were packed with butter, sugar, as per normal brioche bread recipes. Aren't all of them packed with butter and sugary goodness? And another person reckons the chocolate ones are just sickly. Keep your thoughts coming. Text us on 2101. COVID-19 may have ground the country to a halt in 2020, but new figures show total emissions dropped a measly 3% compared to the year before. It's the only year in 2 decades where New Zealand has registered a decrease in the annual greenhouse gas inventory. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
It was the sound which heralded lockdown, the only sound. The empty roads meant no traffic noise. There was no construction, no manufacturing. It was a quiet time. Some hoped the quiet might give the earth some breathing space, push pause on the climate crisis. One headline in 2020 asked, could COVID lockdowns save the planet? Newsflash, they didn't.
It really shows how much work we've got to do.
The latest data published today shows New Zealand released almost 79 million tonnes of greenhouse gas in 2020. That's down just 3% on the year before. It's the first time in 2 decades the country has recorded a drop. Compared to 1990, gross emissions are up 21%. The Climate Change Minister, James Shaw, says New Zealand must go further and faster.
Having a global pandemic is not the way to reduce emissions. We actually need to do it by doing the very hard work of ensuring that our industry and our forestry and our waste and our agriculture and all of that kind of stuff actually does have those sustained changes over time.
The new figures come just a week after a major climate report from the United Nations. It warned radical change was needed immediately to avoid catastrophe. Think more floods, fires, droughts and heat waves.
We are on a fast track
to climate disaster.
Into more bad news, Professor Ralph Sims from Massey University says it's unlikely the downturn of 2020 is a trend. He thinks it's more likely a blip due to COVID-19 and emissions will bounce back.
To be honest, not many people or companies have really seriously taken matters into their hands as to how to reduce their carbon footprints.
He says much more is needed, more electric vehicles, less coal, and in the agriculture sector, a wider shift towards reducing meat consumption.
For some time, I've eaten less.
I'm not that organised to which days are meat-free or meat days.
Look, I've had an Impossible burger. I had one 4 years ago in Hawaii when they'd just come out, and they were absolutely astonishing.
Agriculture will pose a particular challenge for New Zealand. It's responsible for half of all emissions and is the country's largest industry. The sector is the only one not currently taxed under the emissions trading scheme. Right now, representatives are working on a proposal on how farmers can reduce emissions to report to the government next month. National's Christopher Luxon says his party is supportive.
We need to actually change our mindset quite a bit, stop being so negative and thinking of farmers as villains, and actually come out and actually back them to be truly world class. And that means investing much more in research and development and making sure we actually lead the world through that.
We have to act. It's not an option, but it also presents a number of opportunities for us as well.
Next month, the government will release New Zealand's first ever emissions reduction plan, setting out a path to net zero by 2050. A pandemic could make only a 3% dent. This is going to take everything.
Frustration at China's no-tolerance COVID policy is growing in Shanghai. City authorities are gradually easing a widespread lockdown, but only in certain districts. Anyone testing positive must quarantine in special isolation sites, whether they show symptoms or not. CNN's David Culver reports from China's financial hub.
You'd never expect to see people in Shanghai, China's most affluent and cosmopolitan city, screaming for food. We are starving, they yell. But after weeks-long COVID lockdown with no promised end, desperation. One community volunteer recording the home of an elderly woman. She says neighbors heard the 90-year-old shouting help for 3 days, pleading for food. Her fridge, empty. Volunteers were finally able to get her a meal. China's central government now in charge of managing Shanghai's COVID outbreak. In a month's time, the daily case count went from double digits to more than 26,000. A Shanghai city leader choked up at a news conference over the weekend, apologizing to Shanghai's more than 25 million residents for failing to meet expectations and promising improvements. Those of us living here kept to our homes. CNN, the only U.S. TV network with a team living through the lockdown. In my community, we're only allowed out when summoned by workers using a megaphone, and when dark out, a flashlight. Getting a late evening now request to go get a COVID test. My neighbors and I line up, ready for health workers to scan our QR codes, which link the results to our ID. Night or day, the testing is constant. Someone in the community tested positive, so they'll test now each of us once again. We can also leave the house to line up for government distributions or to get approved deliveries, usually the most exciting part of the day. What looks to be vacuum-sealed pork, and then several boxes of traditional Chinese medicines. A bunch more face masks, a box that has a bunch of fresh fruit. On top, they have some frozen meat, and then 2 antigen kits. Food deliveries this plentiful are rare, so most of us spend our mornings trying to order groceries online, but orders sell out quickly. Not enough delivery drivers to get through the lockdown barriers. Communities like mine resorting to group buys. We come together in chat groups and try to source food directly from suppliers in bulk. Neighbors helping neighbors is a common theme across the city. We found a safe drop spot to trade cheese for oranges. Our community's volunteers help us source food where they can, though they too are exhausted and hungry. From above, you see this metropolis, quiet, eerily empty. But on the ground, there are tragedies shared daily online. This man recording his father, who says he's unable to get admitted to a hospital in the strained system. His dad later died, he says. In this video, a neighbor capturing the wailing of a heartbroken woman, crying out that her loved one had died because of the lockdown.
The Queen has shared her experience of having COVID-19 2 months ago. In a virtual visit to the Royal London Hospital, the 95-year-old monarch says the virus and its cold-like symptoms left her feeling exhausted. The BBC's Louisa Pilbeam has this story from Windsor.
It does leave one very tired and exhausted, doesn't it, this horrible pandemic?
It's the first time we've heard the Queen speak about her bout of COVID as she sympathised with a patient who ended up on a ventilator due to the virus.
I'm better now.
I'm getting there. I'm recovering. I'm much better. I mean, I've recently left the wheelchair, so I'm walking about now.
I'm glad that you're getting better.
It was February when the Queen isolated here at Windsor Castle after testing positive for COVID. The palace called the 95-year-old's symptoms mild and cold-like, and she continued light duties from the castle like official paperwork and video calls. But as weeks passed, she pulled out of the Commonwealth Service at Westminster Abbey. By last month, though, she met the Canadian Prime Minister in person and welcomed a teapot and pottery exhibition to the castle. In recent times, the Queen has been walking with the aid of a stick at Prince Philip's memorial service at Westminster Abbey 2 weeks ago. The Queen has already announced that she'll not attend the Easter Maundy church service on Thursday.
It's been very nice to be able to...
Despite cancelling some engagements, Her Majesty did seem in good spirits in her latest video call.
Thank you very much indeed, all of you.
OK, some feedback before the news at 6. This on the Whammy Bar, where the landlord Paul Reid has been criticising them for using vaccine passes. This person says, good on Whammy, it's a simple health and safety issue and they're doing their best to keep themselves and their customers safe. Ka pai. And then there's a missing word, which I think is a naughty one, and it says punk rock, ? Died in the 1980s, sadly. But someone agrees with the landlord. They say vaccine passes might make the customers and staff feel safer, but they won't make them any safer. On the pressing issue of what is the best flavour of hot cross buns, this listener says chocolate and hot cross buns or trifle is an abomination. Trifle is a hard no from me under all circumstances. Andy says traditional hot cross buns for me, but with mature cheddar cheese. Tasty, beautiful, interesting. And RO Bake makes hot cross donuts. You're welcome, says Sarah.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, kia ora tātou. I'm Evie Ashton. Wairoa and Tairāwhiti residents are bracing for heavy downpours and damaging winds from the former cyclone Phili tonight and tomorrow. A red rain warning is in place with up to 350 millimetres expected in some areas. Severe gales are also predicted, gusting up to 120 kilometres an hour, especially around Wairoa, Gisborne and southeastern parts of Taupō. Met Service meteorologist Lewis Ferris says it's coming at a bad time after the bad weather 3 weeks ago left the roading network fragile. Insurance companies are advising North Islanders in the path of the storm to take precautions against damage. AMI, State and NZI, which are part of the IAG group, advise securing loose objects or moving them indoors if possible. They say trampolines and rubbish bins can become dangerous if they're picked up in high winds, and gutters should be cleared before the rain starts. If there's a chance floodwaters could reach homes, valuables, appliances and furniture should be moved off the floor. A friend of a rising MMA fighter who was killed by an undefended punch to the head wants a longer prison sentence for his attacker. Today, Daniel Havili was jailed for 2 years and 9 months after pleading guilty to the manslaughter of Liu Fauvake. The sentence was discounted from a starting point of 5 years, but the end sentence, less than 3 years for taking someone's life, was not enough for Fauvake's good friend Dan Hooker.
That's heartbreaking. 2 year sentence for killing someone is not a deterrent whatsoever. There has to be some kind of change because that is completely... I don't know anyone that can accept that.
The judge, Sally Fitzgerald, gave a number of discounts to the sentence, including for pleading guilty, his own troubled childhood and his remorse. Western officials say Ukraine is entering a crucial period as Russian forces regroup and prepare a fresh offensive in the east. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia is concentrating tens of thousands of soldiers in the region. The BBC's Jonathan Beale has more.
One Western official tonight said that they expected Russia to double, even triple its forces in this region. They already have 40,000 troops in this area. And I think everybody is expecting this phase of the war to be decisive. They're also expecting it to be bloody. Remember, the person who President Putin has put in charge of this military campaign now, the new general in charge, has been dubbed the Butcher of Syria. He leveled cities there. The expectation is he could do the same here.
The Finance Minister isn't giving much away ahead of the May budget, but he says the government will continue to look at how to encourage greater use of public transport. As part of a cost of living package, it's subsidised half-price fares for 3 months from April the 1st. That same week, use in Auckland hit the 1 million trips mark, achieving a record high. National says the case for government subsidies doesn't stack up and public transport should pay for itself. Grant Robertson says it will play an important part in achieving New Zealand's climate goals.
It also plays an important role in supporting particularly those on low and middle income. So obviously we'll continue to look at the ways that we can support it.
The 3-month reduction is estimated to cost between $25 and $40 million. The Greens want the government to go further and make public transport free. Australia's competition watchdog has received a complaint about Qantas Airline's credit policy, which could see people struggling to spend millions in flight dollars. Dean Price from consumer advocacy group Choice told Checkpoint the Australian organisation had lodged the complaint. He says people are facing a range of issues with the airline, but one of the terms and conditions is particularly unfair.
The one that forces people to only use their voucher for a flight that is of equal or greater value than the one that they bought to begin with. And, you know, while sometimes that might be okay, if you've booked an international flight, it can be quite hard to find a domestic flight of similar value that you can actually use that voucher for.
Dean Price says while the group has also received complaints about other airlines, including Jetstar and Virgin, most have been about Qantas. And the co-owner of an Auckland bar that continues to use vaccine passes says he thought it was a prank when the bar received a negative Facebook review from its landlord. Paul Reid of Icon Group rated Whammy Bar 1 star, saying it used to be cool. Today he stood by his words and his use of the social media platform to air his views. He says vaccine passes and the resulting exclusion of some customers seems like a bad business decision. Whammy Bar co-owner Tom Anderson disagrees. He says nobody knows the business better than the staff, and vaccine passes will stay because the workers and punters want to feel safe while COVID case numbers are high. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Tony Stamp samples new music from Norway's Jenny Haval and London's Evie Bio sound machine. A window on the world looks at food and the cost of living, because no one can live without it. We're heading back to Futurama for this week's Sci-Fi Sci-Fact and the plausibility of an atom so big you can see it. And Patrick Phelps from Minerals West Coast is bound to dig up some lively debate. All on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after news at 7 on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next. First, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. And just a reminder, with former Cyclone Philly approaching the North Island, keep up to date with the latest warnings and watches from the Met Service. From Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo, rain over Northland is spreading south to the Bay of Plenty today and elsewhere tomorrow. Some heavy falls. Easing from Northland to Waikato tomorrow. Gale southeasterlies are developing, changing to southwest tomorrow. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain is developing in Gisborne this evening and Hawke's Bay overnight, becoming heavy with downpours and possible thunderstorms, gale force southeasterlies. For Waitomo, Taumarunui, Taihape and also for Wairarapa, cloudy periods, occasional rain tomorrow. From Taranaki to Wellington, scattered showers that are clearing tomorrow. For the South Island, Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, a few showers today, mainly fine tomorrow. For Nelson and Marlborough, mainly fine, a few showers for you this evening. For Canterbury, Otago and Southland, rain in Canterbury is easing this afternoon, cloudy periods elsewhere. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, occasional rain is developing this evening. It's 7 minutes past 6. Our next news headlines are at 6:30.
Kia ora, Evie, and just remember, listeners, if you've got a sourdough hot cross bun recipe, Evie is in the market for it. Flick it through to checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Maybe in the info line, put something like Evie's buns. That'd be great. Thank you. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Met Service has issued a red warning for Tairāwhiti and Wairoa. That means residents are being told to act now to protect themselves, their properties and their animals. It's just 3 weeks after the last severe downpour tore bridges apart and destroyed roads. Meteorologist Peter Little joins us now. Peter, what's the latest?
Well, at the moment, the centre of this low-pressure system is around 320 kilometres northeast of Cape Reinga. It's going to continue moving southeastwards, and this evening we're going to start to see that heavy rain spread southwards. It's currently over Northland, and it's going to move into places like Gisborne and the Wairoa district overnight. And yes, unfortunately, we are expecting strong winds as well. Significant rain for those regions on the way.
So, Peter, at the moment in Gisborne, our reporter says it all looks hunky-dory there. When you say it's going to arrive overnight, how fast is it travelling? Are we talking about the dead of the night here, or early evening, or what?
We're expecting the rain to start in Gisborne around about 10 p.m. It takes a few more hours to get down to the Wairoa district, but the really heaviest rain is going to sort of get going during the overnight period and into tomorrow morning. And even tomorrow afternoon is when we're expecting the heaviest rain in places like Gisborne. Yeah,
and so when you say heavy, what kind of volumes are you talking?
Well, we're looking at this stage for Gisborne in a 24-hour period of 200 to 300 millimetres of rain. That is a huge amount of rain, and especially since they've already been quite wet. So we do expect there to be problems there. And the Wairoa district could even get a little more than that in a slightly longer period. So really those regions will likely experience flooding, and people need to stay safe.
Yeah, so they've been absolutely smashed over the last few weeks, and those levels of rain that you've talked about there, are they on a par with what they've had in the previous incidents, or is it worse?
It actually could be worse, and especially since the ground is already quite wet. The rivers are going to come up quite quickly, so we're expecting there'll be some large impacts in those regions.
So it's carrying on down to Wairoa once it gets through Tairāwhiti, and then what happens? Is it petering out, or is it carrying on down to somewhere else?
Well, the system takes a southeastward track, so we're expecting it to pass by East Cape on Wednesday evening, and then gradually it moves out to the east of the country, and as it moves away, we start to see both the rain and the wind ease. But really, it's not just Gisborne and the sort of Wairoa district that are going to cop it. There's going to be strong winds across the entire North Island, particularly areas in the east from Auckland down to Hawke's Bay, and there's also going to be heavy rain for sort of central central parts of Hawke's Bay, also across Bay of Plenty, right up to eastern parts of Whangarei, also eastern parts of Northland also. So this system is going to have effects over quite a lot of the North Island.
So Peter, again, when you say high winds, what are we talking?
So we're looking at south to southwest gales of round about sort of 100 kilometres an hour in many places, but for those areas that I mentioned from sort of Auckland in the east through to Hawke's Bay, looking at more like 120 kilometre-hour gusts, and they could even be up to around 140 in about Bay of Plenty east of Whakatane.
Gosh, this sounds flippin' awful. So is it going to be, crappy all Easter?
No, well, the good news is that as the system does move off, it allows a ridge of high pressure to move in from the Tasman Sea. So fortunately, it shouldn't really spoil too many Easter egg hunts.
Thanks, Peter. Really appreciate your time. That's Peter Little from Met Service there, warning about that rain heading down towards Tairāwhiti and beyond. The Warriors are defending their response to a homophobic slur made by outside back Marcelo Montoya. In last Friday's rugby league match in Queensland, Montoya will front the NRL judiciary tonight, facing a charge of contrary conduct after microphones picked up the comment he made to a Cowboys player. The Warriors issued a statement and an apology on Sunday, but some are criticising the response as tardy. Clay Wilson reports.
The Warriors celebrated their third straight win on Friday night, but the victory was somewhat tainted by Marcelo Montoya's homophobic slur picked up by broadcast microphones. An official statement from the Warriors didn't come until almost 48 hours after the game, which left the first openly gay player of rugby league's professional era, Ian Roberts, questioning what had taken the club so long. Warriors CEO Cameron George is reiterating the club's apology for Montoya's comment, but he's defending its response and says he spoke to players and staff about it the day after the game.
Due to process at the NRL's end, I was held up from making a statement. And as I said before, just rewind to the Reece Walsing, it's not our style. I would have been out Saturday morning if I was told by the NRL what they were investigating into and how they were doing it. I wouldn't have cared about their process. I would have just made our statement and apologised.
Warriors captain Tohu Harris, who is back in New Zealand recovering from injury, has also spoken to Montoya on the phone since Friday. Harris says Montoya, who won the Warriors Clubman of the Year award in 2021, is hugely remorseful.
He almost couldn't put it into words. You could hear it in his voice just how regretful he was of his actions, and because he's not that type of person, he's someone who will literally take his shirt off and give it to someone if he could. As a club and as players, we obviously don't condone that sort of behaviour or that sort of language, and we know he doesn't either. It was just a massive error in judgment.
Warriors hooker Wade Egan is echoing that sentiment.
He definitely did mean any malice in what he said. You know, heat of the battle. We play a very violent game as rugby league players. So, yeah, we're just supporting him this week, and we'll let the judiciary sort of decide what punishment he gets.
That decision will be made later tonight at Montoya's NRL hearing. The Warriors have already entered an early guilty plea. George says any additional punishment the club could hand down won't be considered until after the NRL process is complete.
We'll just get through tonight. We support Marcelo as a person. He's a terrific human being, and he's doing a little bit tough about it at the moment as well. So we just want to support him and his family, and tonight will be what it is, and we'll deal with it tomorrow and thereafter.
The Warriors will make a special submission to the judiciary when it considers the charge and penalty tonight.
And it is 13 minutes past 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. As Russia struggles to capture major Ukrainian cities, including the capital, it's refocusing its attack to the east of the country. And the destruction imposed on the southeastern city of Mariupol shows what Russian forces are capable of. The ABC's Catherine Gregory reports.
In the besieged city of Mariupol in Ukraine's southeast, emergency workers are sifting through the rubble of destroyed buildings, looking for the latest victims from Russian attacks. The city's mayor says at least 10,000 civilians have been killed, but the death toll could be far higher, and that Russian forces have even brought mobile crematoria to the city to dispose of the bodies. Hundreds of thousands of people have fled. But for those who've stayed, it's been a challenge to survive.
We thought the worst thing is an air bomb, but in fact, the most terrifying thing is a tank. There is nothing worse than a tank. When it moves while you're lying on the ground, you can hear the sound of the gun in movement, that it's very scary. You can really hear it. You don't know where it will shoot. We got lucky. We were at the second entrance. We survived.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called on the West for more weapon supplies, including jets, heavily armoured vehicles, and artillery that could help in liberating Mariupol. He also wants more severe sanctions against Russia, specifically a ban on its oil, in a bid to stop Russia from using chemical weapons.
Один з рупорів окупантів заявив про те, що вони
One of the Russian occupiers' spokesmen said they might use chemical weapons against the defenders of Mariupol. We take that threat very seriously. I'd like to remind world leaders that Russia's possible use of chemical weapons has already been discussed.
The use of chemical weapons hasn't been verified, but Australia's Foreign Minister Marise Payne says if confirmed, the ramifications are significant.
That will be a further wholesale breach of international law.
The United Nations is increasingly worried about other forms of torture Russian forces are inflicting on Ukrainian people. It says it's increasingly hearing stories of rape and sexual violence. UN human rights monitors are trying to verify these allegations of sexual violence by Russian forces, including gang rape and rapes in front of children. UN Women Executive Director Seema Baus.
These allegations must be independently investigated to ensure justice and accountability. The combination of mass displacement with the large presence of conscripts and mercenaries and the brutality displayed against Ukrainian civilians has raised all red flags.
But Russia's deputy UN ambassador, Dmitry Polyansky, says Russia is not waging a war against Ukrainian civilians.
Since today's meeting is also on the topic of women, peace and security, I feel duty-bound to comment on this topic as well. As it applies to the Ukraine, of course, it is also being determined by ideology and full of provocations. We see a clear intention to present Russian soldiers as sadists and rapists.
Russian forces are withdrawing from the northern parts of Ukraine and around the capital, Kyiv, partly because Ukrainian forces have put up stiff resistance. So now Russia is refocusing its efforts on the east of the country, and a former Australian Army officer, retired Army Major General Mick Ryan, says a desperate and wounded Russia poses a deadly threat to eastern Ukraine.
The Russians need to generate some kind of success or victory in this part of the country. They've been beaten by the Ukrainians in the battle for Kyiv, but we should also be aware that many of these redeploying forces are hollowed out through combat losses and equipment losses.
Campaigning for next month's Aussie election is in full swing, and Prime Minister Scott Morrison is focusing on job creation. Unemployment is at a 13-year low, and Morrison is promising another 1.3 million jobs over the next 5 years. But in an election focused on wage growth and cost of living, opposition leader Labor's Anthony Albanese is fumbling. Today he failed to answer questions on interest rates and couldn't remember what the unemployment rate was. The ABC's Annie Guest spoke to voters.
At Caboolture, north of Brisbane, there's a barbecue to raise money for a flooded BMX club.
I do race Caboolture BMX Club. It's super fun to ride around the track and you can get different types of trophies.
Today is also a chance to celebrate a family birthday.
Happy birthday!
This woman works in the local supermarket. Her parents have retired from the army and public service, but her 22-year-old son is struggling to find work.
I don't have a job at the moment.
Couch potato.
I'm not a couch potato.
Yeah.
I do apply for jobs, but just no one wants me. It's like no one wants someone with what I do.
What do you do? What can you do?
He did a bar course. He when he left school, and then as soon as he qualified and left, that's when everything hit, COVID hit.
A freight train has basically crashed straight into me.
About 600,000 Australians don't have a job. The national jobless rate is 4%. And the recent federal budget forecasts it'll drop to 3.75% this year, the lowest in 50 years. At Emu Run in Alice Springs, owner Patrick Bedford can't get staff.
So we do premium day touring throughout the Red Centre as well as group touring. So we go to locations like Uluru. We'd like to employ more staff to be able to take on more work. But unfortunately, because there's a low supply of people applying, it's making it a little bit difficult to expand the business out to where we used to be.
What other kind of workers are people looking for in the NT?
I don't know of a business that's not looking for workers, and I'll be honest with you. Every hotel in the region, they're all looking for staff.
That's partly thanks to fewer working holiday makers and international students because of the pandemic. Job agent Catherine McMillan only deals with white-collar jobs, but she's recently been surprised by approaches from other desperate employers.
We've had many businesses come to us asking for assistance on a wide variety of roles: hospitality, babysitters, warehouse workers, a huge variety of roles, and we don't do those at all.
Instead, her agency deals with office jobs in capital cities, and there's a huge staff shortage there too.
Customer service, internal sales type roles, any role that is, disseminating information and customer facing. Also, we've seen huge growth in HR roles.
Britons are grappling with the worst cost of living crisis since the 70s, and Islamic charities say Muslim communities are some of the hardest hit. They're warning half of the UK's Muslim population could struggle to buy food to break their fasts this Ramadan. The BBC's Shabnam Mahmood spoke to families at a food bank in East London.
Badr, who has 4 children, including a 1-year-old, regularly visits this food bank in East London.
We are struggling to survive because of energy prices are really making a big difference in our lives, which is too much for us. What do we earn? What can we save? What should we feed our children?
Further along the queue for the food bank, I meet Bushra. She lives in one room with a husband and 3 children.
Rats are also coming in my room, so it's become very difficult. I can't move to other room because I can't pay the expenses for the other room.
Both Badr and Bushra are struggling, especially during the Muslim holy month of fasting.
I'm just cutting off the expensive food, especially the rice, the oil, the meat, and I have literally reduced the quantity of them, the usage of them. I can't buy anything. I'm just living by eating the food banks, whatever they're providing items. Even they are providing snacks for my kids, so kids are also eating snacks.
Everything. I mean, milk has gone up.
Wow. Just your charity, Islamic Relief, are warning this Ramadan half of the UK's Muslim community will find it hard to feed their families. Shazia Arshad is their spokesperson.
We have estimated, based on findings from a number of organisations, that about 50% of Muslims are living in poverty in the UK, and we're concerned that this means that they won't be able to put a meal on the table at the end of a fasting day.
We're putting in veg and fruit, so we have potatoes, passion fruit, apples.
Food banks like the Newham Community Project in East London rely on charitable donations, especially during Ramadan, when Muslims tend to donate even more to charity. But this year, manager Ilyas Ismail says it's hard.
Our donations have more or less come down from 100% to around about 20%. I mean, we have to now start chasing people. Previously, we didn't have to do as much, but now we have to start chasing people to sort of give donations, give funding, so we can carry on running the food bank.
So with the extra financial strain on family budgets, just how are people marking the holy month? Bashir, Sadia and Sifa say they make sacrifices by skipping one of the 2 meals allowed daily in Ramadan.
Sometimes I do only sahri and sometimes I only do iftar only.
Because you don't have enough food?
Yeah.
Majorly we're struggling for food. So I have to skip 1 meal at a time because my children have to eat. So I have to make sacrifices for that. Sometimes my husband also does.
So I regularly prepare only 2 foods in the iftar and also use that all food in the shahri. Don't waste food at all because it's too costly for us.
Now, Islamic Relief have joined other charities calling on the government to do more to help families during this difficult financial year.
Hollywood star Johnny Depp's legal battle with his former wife, Amber Heard, has returned to the courtroom in the US. The actress has accused Depp of domestic abuse while he has filed for libel. The BBC's David Solito has more.
Fairfax, Virginia, and the fans have arrived for the beginning of this court case between Johnny Depp and his former wife, Amber Heard. The heart of this libel trial, allegations of repeated assault. This is, of course, the second time they've met in court arguing over the issue. It was in the summer of 2020 that Johnny Depp tried to sue the Sun over an allegation that he was a wife-beater. He lost the case. The judge ruled that the claim was substantially true. Johnny Depp said the judgment was perverse and bewildering. So 2 accounts of a marriage that are diametrically opposed, and the previous judgment was overwhelmingly in Amber Heard's favour. So this, a second attempt to try to restore a reputation. And the jury has today been told to tell their families they could be here for 7 weeks. For Johnny Depp, the judgment in London had an immediate impact. He was, for instance, dropped from the Fantastic Beasts movie. But many of his fans have remained loyal.
Hopefully, just being here, knowing that we're supporting him, that we care enough to show up and make plans for this kind of thing will encourage him and support him to go through this ordeal.
And for Amber Heard, who didn't even name Johnny Depp in the article in question in the Washington Post, another long court case challenging her account of suffering abuse and assault.
New York has added a new shape to its skyline. The Steinway Tower is the third tallest building in the city, and according to its developers, it's the skinniest skyscraper in the world. So skinny, they're dubbing it the coffee stirrer. As the BBC's Aina Aslam reports, it's dividing opinion.
Manhattan's newest building looms 435 metres above Central Park, but is less than 20 metres wide, earning it some fitting nicknames like Pencil Tower and the Coffee Stirrer. Each luxury apartment takes up an entire floor of the tower, boasting 360-degree views of the city when the clouds aren't in the way, and the building will gently rock you to sleep, because the top of the tower can sway up to a metre when it's very windy, which in New York is quite often. The thought makes many people feel queasy, but Lisa Deering, an architect who designed a much smaller supercenter tower in the UK, says such buildings won't blow over.
It is a big feat of engineering, and there's a mix of things. There's improvements in, say, the quality of concrete and elements that go into it, putting in large dampeners, which is almost like a large suspension system, for want of a better word, within the building to stop the movement, and then also potentially weighting on the top, so you've got less movement as you go up.
But of course, things can go wrong. The residents of a nearby slender skyscraper, 432 Park Avenue, are suing their developers for alleged design and construction faults, including excessive swaying that left visitors to the penthouse feeling super nauseated. Turns out life at the top isn't all it's cracked up to be. But there's been a boom in the number of super slender buildings popping up in New York. Local planning laws restrict the amount of land that can be built on and the height or air rights of any building. However, a legal loophole allows developers to buy a small, very expensive parcel of land and then buy unused air rights from nearby buildings and stack these together to build a tall but thin tower. The designers of the Steinway Tower hail it as a project of extraordinary proportions and epic grandeur. New Yorkers squinting up at the building seem to disagree. Well, if you'd like to judge for yourself, the tower is ready for residents to move in. Prices start at about $8 million and go all the way up to $60 million.
It just gives me the heebies looking at it. Do check out the picture of it. It seems really skinny. There's a helicopter, I think, parked on the top. It barely fits. They call it the coffee stirrer. I reckon it should be, well, the rat stick. It looks like one of those rapid antigen things that you have to put up your nose. Now, the nauseating penthouse suite is on the market for just under 100 million New Zealand dollars. 100 million New Zealand dollars, and you get to feel seasick almost every day. That's about all we've got time for. Now, the late news team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. And if you missed anything from the program, don't forget you can always check us out on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcast from. Now, ko te kaupapa tuatahi o pōpō, and tomorrow from 5 a.m, first up we'll be heading to Auckland Airport as the first Aussie tourists arrive in the country without having to isolate. It's going to be like Love Actually live from 5 a.m. tomorrow. And you'll be really pleased to hear that Evie Ashton has got her sourdough recipe, thanks to one of our listeners, to make hot cross buns. Apparently it's very time consuming. We're hoping to taste the spoils of that experiment, so we'll keep you posted. Kei te hoki mai anō o pōpō whānau. Pomare.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. Wairoa and Tairāwhiti residents are bracing for heavy downpours and damaging winds from the former cyclone Phili tonight and tomorrow. A friend of a rising MMA fighter who was killed by an undefended punch to the head wants a longer prison sentence for his attacker. Western officials say Ukraine is entering a crucial period as Russian forces regroup and prepare a fresh offensive in the east. And the National Māori Authority has called for an inquiry after white supremacist brochures appeared in Tauranga. Those are the headlines. Our next news